The space station called Valora's Cradle was always busy. Ships came and went at all hours. Cargo moved through its many docking bays like blood through a living body. Hundreds of alien species worked here, loading boxes, checking manifests, and keeping the great station running. Kethri had worked as a dock supervisor for 12 cycles. She was a Vallani, a species known for their shimmering scales that changed color with their moods. Right now, her scales were shifting to a frustrated orange as she stared at the problem blocking Bay 17. The problem was a crate, but not just any crate. This was a massive cylinder made of reinforced metal, standing 3 times taller than Kethri herself. According to her datapad, the crate weighed 1,147 standard units. Inside it were machine parts for a mining colony 3 systems away. The parts were needed urgently. The mining colony had sent 17 messages in the last rotation alone, and the crate was not moving anywhere. Kethri walked around the crate slowly, her thin fingers tapping against her datapad. The anti-gravity lifters that should have carried the crate to its ship had broken down that morning. The repair team said they needed 2 rotations to fix them. The backup drones were all being used for an emergency medical shipment on the other side of the station. There were no machines available to move this crate. She stopped walking and let out a long breath through the slits on the sides of her neck. There was nothing she could do. The crate was too heavy for any organic species to move. The Drothkai were strong, yes, but even 3 of them together could not budge something this heavy. The Vallani were quick and smart, but their bodies were built for speed, not strength. The Frenari had many arms, but those arms were thin and weak. No species in the known galaxy could move 1,147 standard units without machine help. Kethri pulled out a glowing label from her belt pouch and pressed it firmly onto the side of the crate. The words shone bright in the universal trade language, machine only. It was a standard label used across thousands of stations. It meant that only machines could handle this cargo. It meant that organic workers should not even try. She began typing commands into her datapad, rerouting the traffic in Bay 17 around the stuck crate. Other cargo would have to go the long way. It would slow everything down, but there was no other choice. She would have to send a message to the mining colony telling them their parts would be late. That was when she heard footsteps behind her. Kethri turned to see a human walking toward her. She recognized him from the worker roster. His name was Marcus Chen, and he had been working at the station for only 3 weeks. He was of average height for his species, with brown skin and short black hair. He wore the simple gray uniform of a freight handler. Humans were still relatively new to galactic society. Their homeworld, called Earth, had only made contact with the wider galaxy about 50 cycles ago. Kethri had worked with a few humans before. They were strange creatures. They ate an alarming variety of foods. They made odd sounds with their mouths that they called laughing. They seemed to have no natural weapons, no claws, no fangs, no venom. She had always wondered how they had survived long enough on their planet to develop space travel. Marcus stopped next to her and looked up at the massive crate. His face showed curiosity rather than concern. "What's going on here?" he asked. His voice was casual, friendly. "Why is this big thing blocking the bay?" Kethri's scales shifted to a tired blue. "The anti-gravity lifters are broken," she explained, "and all the cargo drones are busy with emergency shipments. We have no way to move this crate to its ship." Marcus nodded slowly, still looking at the crate. "How long until you can move it?" 6 rotations at least, Kethri said. "Maybe more. The repair team is backed up with other work." 6 rotations? Marcus repeated. He seemed surprised. "But it just needs to go over there, right?" He pointed across the bay to where a cargo ship waited with its loading ramp down. The distance was perhaps 200 meters. "Yes," Kethri said, "but the crate weighs 147 standard units. No organic species can move something that heavy. We must wait for machines." She expected the human to nod and walk away. That was what any sensible worker would do. The label said machine only. The rules were clear. There was nothing more to discuss. But Marcus did not walk away. Instead, he walked around the crate slowly, just as Kethri had done. He looked at its base, at its sides, at the smooth metal surface. He reached out and touched it with his bare hand, as if testing something. "It's on wheels," he said. Kethri blinked. "What?" "The base. It has wheels built in. Small ones, but they're there, for when it needs to be moved short distances. Yes, Catherine said impatiently, but the wheels do not matter. The crate is too heavy to push. Even with wheels, you would need a force equal to— Where exactly does it need to go? Marcus interrupted. Catherine pointed again at the waiting ship. Bay 23, the cargo ship with the blue markings. But I already told you, no organic species can— I'll move it, Marcus said. Catherine's scales flashed to confused yellow. She thought perhaps she had misheard him, or perhaps the translator in her ear was malfunctioning. I am sorry, she said carefully. Can you repeat that? I said I'll move it. Marcus was already walking back toward a storage area near the bay entrance. Just give me a minute to grab some straps. Catherine stood very still. Her mind tried to process what was happening. This human, this soft-looking creature with no claws and no scales and no extra limbs, was saying he would move a crate that weighed nearly 2,000 standard units. By himself, without machines. It was not possible. It was simply not possible. She looked at the label on the crate. Machine only. The label was clear. The rules were clear. The laws of physics were clear. But Marcus Chen was already coming back, carrying a set of heavy cargo straps over his shoulder. He had taken off his gray jacket, leaving only a thin undershirt that showed his arms. Catherine noticed that his arms looked different from what she expected. There were strange shapes under his skin, moving as he walked. She realized with a start that she was looking at muscles, human muscles. She had never really looked at them before. Marcus reached the crate and began wrapping the straps around its base, threading them through the wheel supports with practiced ease. His movements were confident, almost casual. He did not look like someone about to attempt the impossible. Catherine found her voice at last. Human Marcus, she said, I must advise you that what you are planning is not safe. The weight of this crate exceeds all known limits for organic. I appreciate the concern, Marcus said, not looking up from his work. But I've moved heavy stuff before. This is just physics. Mass, friction, leverage. He finished securing the straps and stood up, rolling his shoulders in a circular motion. Besides, those miners need their parts, right? Catherine did not know what to say. She watched as Marcus wrapped the ends of the straps around his forearms and planted his feet wide apart on the deck plating. His stance was strange, almost like a predator preparing to pounce. Other workers in the bay had started to notice. A Drothkai merchant stopped to stare. Two Villani freight handlers put down their loads and walked closer. Even the automated cleaning drone seemed to pause in its path. Marcus took a deep breath. His chest expanded. His hands tightened on the straps, and then he began to pull. The crate did not move. Marcus pulled with all his strength. His feet pressed hard against the deck plating. The straps dug into his forearms. His face tightened with effort. But the massive cylinder stayed exactly where it was. Catherine felt a small wave of relief wash through her. For a moment, she had almost believed the human could do it. But physics was physics. Nearly 2,000 standard units of weight could not be moved by flesh and bone alone. She opened her mouth to tell Marcus to stop, to save himself from injury. But before she could speak, something changed. Marcus shifted his stance. He bent his knees deeper and leaned forward, almost like he was going to fall. His breathing changed too, becoming slower and more controlled. The muscles in his arms seemed to grow larger under his skin. Catherine could see thick cords standing out along his neck and shoulders. Then the human made a sound. It was a low, grunting noise that came from deep in his chest. It was not a word in any language. It was something more basic, more ancient. It was the sound of a body pushing itself beyond normal limits. And the crate moved. It was just a tiny amount at first, less than a finger's width, but it moved. The wheels at the base, which had been locked in place by the sheer weight pressing down on them, began to turn with a slow, grinding sound. Catherine's scales flashed to pure white, the Villani color of complete shock. Marcus kept pulling. His whole body was shaking now, but he did not stop. One step backward, then another. The crate followed him, rolling slowly across the deck. The grinding sound grew louder as the wheels picked up speed. The Drothkai merchant, who had stopped to watch, made a high-pitched whistling sound, which was his species' way of expressing disbelief. He was a large creature, covered in thick gray plates. and he had always considered himself strong. He knew exactly how much he could lift and pull. What the human was doing should have been impossible. More workers were gathering now. They came from other bays, drawn by the strange sounds and the sight of the small crowd forming around Bay 17. A group of Frenari traders, each with 6 arms and a dozen eyes, clustered together and chittered rapidly in their own language. 2 Corvati security officers stopped their patrol to observe, their armored hands resting on their weapons out of pure habit. Kethri could not move. She could only stand and watch as Marcus Chen, a human freight handler who had been at the station for 3 weeks, dragged a machine-only crate across the deck through nothing but the strength of his own body. The human's face had turned a dark red color. Kethri had seen this before in humans and knew it was related to something called blood pressure. It had always seemed like a design flaw to her. Villani blood was clear and did not rush to the face during physical effort. But now, watching Marcus, she wondered if that red flush was actually a sign of something else, a sign of power being unleashed. Veins stood out on Marcus's neck and arms like rivers on a map. His breathing came in sharp, rhythmic bursts. Each breath was followed by another grunt of effort, another step backward, another meter of progress. "This is not possible," the Drothkai merchant said out loud. His translator rendered the words in the common tongue for everyone to hear. "I have seen loading machines with less pulling power than this human." A Villani dock worker next to Kethri made a sound of agreement. His scales were flickering through a dozen different colors as his body tried to process what his eyes were seeing. "How is he doing this? Humans are not listed as a high-strength species in any database." Kethri shook her head slowly. "I do not know." The crate was now about 20 meters from its starting point. Marcus paused for a moment, still holding the straps tight. His chest heaved as he took several deep breaths. Sweat was running down his face in small rivers. Kethri had heard about human sweat before. It was a cooling system, she knew, a way for humans to regulate their body temperature during physical activity. Most species found it disgusting. The Frenari in particular were backing away slightly, their many eyes blinking in distaste at the sight of liquid coming out of a creature's skin. But Kethri did not find it disgusting. She found it fascinating. She was watching a body adapt in real time, pushing out waste heat so that it could keep working, keep fighting, keep moving forward. It was crude compared to the elegant cooling systems of the Villani, but there was something impressive about its raw efficiency. Marcus wiped his forehead with the back of his hand and took a fresh grip on the straps. "About 180 meters to go," he said almost to himself. His voice was strained but steady. Then he started pulling again. The crowd had grown to nearly 50 workers now. They lined the edges of Bay 17, watching in silence. No one tried to help. It was not that they did not want to, it was that they could not. What could a Villani or a Frenari add to this? Their combined strength would barely make a difference against 147 standard units. This was a task for machines, and yet here was this human doing it alone. Kethri noticed that some workers had pulled out their personal devices and were recording the scene. Others were sending messages, probably telling friends and colleagues to come watch. The news was spreading through the station like fire through dry grass. 50 meters. Marcus kept moving, one slow step at a time. His undershirt was now completely soaked with sweat, sticking to his body like a second skin. The muscles in his back shifted and bunched with each pull, creating shapes that Kethri had never noticed before on a human. She found herself moving closer, walking alongside the crate as it rolled forward. She wanted to say something, to ask how this was possible, but she did not want to break his concentration. The human seemed to be in a kind of trance, focused entirely on the task. His eyes were fixed on the cargo ship ahead, never looking down, never looking at the crowd. 70 meters. The Corvati security officers had called for their commander. They said something about xenobiological documentation, which was the official term for recording unusual alien behaviors. One of them was already speaking into his communicator, requesting a science officer to come and observe. 100 meters. Marcus had to stop again. This time the pause was longer. He bent forward, hands on his knees, breathing hard. For a moment, Kethri thought he might give up. The cargo ship was still 100 meters away. He was only halfway there. But when Marcus looked up, There was something in his eyes that Kethri did not recognize. It was not exhaustion, though he was clearly exhausted. It was not pain, though he must have been in considerable pain. It was something else, something that burned. "Come on," Marcus muttered to himself. He straightened up and grabbed the straps again. "Come on, you've got this." He was talking to himself, Kethri realized, encouraging himself, pushing himself forward with nothing but words and willpower. She had heard stories about humans before, stories about their endurance, their stubbornness, their refusal to accept defeat. She had always thought those stories were exaggerations. Every species had legends about itself, after all. The Villani told tales of ancient swimmers who crossed entire oceans. The Drothkai sang songs about warriors who fought for days without rest. But now, watching Marcus Chen drag a machine-only crate across a space station dock through pure determination, Kethri began to wonder if the human stories were not exaggerations at all. Maybe they were understatements. Marcus leaned into the straps and pulled. The crate rolled forward, 110 meters, 120. The crowd had stopped talking completely now. Even the clicking and chittering of the Frenari had fallen silent. The only sounds in Bay 17 were the grinding of wheels, the heavy breathing of the human, and the soft hum of the station around them. And still Marcus kept moving. Commander Thalvex arrived at Base 17 exactly 14 minutes after receiving the first report. He was a Korvathi, a species known for their heavy natural armor and their dedication to rules and order. His shell was a deep green color, marked with the scars of many battles, and his four eyes swept across the scene with the sharp attention of a career military officer. He had been told that a human was moving a machine-only crate by hand. He had not believed it, but now, standing at the edge of the crowd that had grown to over 100 workers, he could see it with his own eyes. The human was about 140 meters from his starting point. He was still pulling, still moving, still refusing to stop. His body was covered in sweat, and his movements had become slower and more careful. But the crate kept rolling forward meter by meter. Thalvex pushed through the crowd until he reached Kethri. The Villani supervisor looked dazed, her scales shifting through colors that had no clear meaning. "Supervisor," Thalvex said, his voice a deep rumble. "Explain this." Kethri turned to him, her eyes wide. "Commander, I told him it was impossible. I told him the crate was too heavy. He did not listen. I can see that he did not listen." Thalvex watched the human take another step backward, pulling the massive crate behind him. "What I want to know is how he is doing this. Humans are not classified as a high-strength species. Their physical capability ratings are below average compared to most galactic standards." "I do not understand it either, Commander." Thalvex made a clicking sound with his mandibles, a sign of deep thought among his people. He pulled out his data pad and began searching through files. "I am looking at the human species profile now. Earth is listed as a Class 7 death world." Kethri's scales flashed to pale yellow. "A death world? I thought humans were from a temperate planet." "They are from a temperate planet," Thalvex said. "A temperate planet with extreme temperature variations, active tectonic plates, frequent natural disasters, and predators in almost every environment." He scrolled through more data. "Their planet has regions of burning desert, frozen wasteland, and thick jungle, often within the same continent. And the gravity—" He paused, his four eyes widening slightly. "What about the gravity?" "Earth's gravity is 1.4 times station standard." Kethri stared at him. That means every human who comes to this station is constantly experiencing a feeling of lightness. To them, everything here weighs less than it should, including that crate." Kethri looked back at Marcus. The human had just passed the 150-meter mark. His progress was slower now, but he had not stopped. She tried to imagine what it would be like to grow up on a world where everything was heavier, where simply walking required more effort, where your body had to be stronger just to survive daily life. "But even so," she said slowly, "weight 147 standard units is still an enormous weight. Reduced gravity cannot explain all of this." "No," Thalvex agreed. "It cannot." He continued reading from his data pad. "According to this profile, humans evolved as persistence predators." I do not know that term. Thalvex looked at her, and for the first time, Kethri saw something like unease in his eyes. Persistence predators are hunters who do not rely on speed or strength to catch their prey. Instead, they follow their prey over long distances, never stopping, never resting, until the prey collapses from exhaustion. He paused. Humans did not evolve to be the fastest or the strongest creatures on their planet. They evolved to be the ones who never give up. Kethri felt a chill run through her body. She looked at Marcus again, at the way he kept moving forward despite his obvious exhaustion, despite the sweat and the strain and the pain he must be feeling. This was not just strength. This was something else. This was a creature designed by evolution to keep going long after any sensible being would have stopped. A science officer had arrived now, a thin Villani named Dr. Shenry, who specialized in xenobiology. She was recording everything with a handheld scanner, her eyes fixed on Marcus with intense professional interest. Remarkable, Dr. Shenry said softly. Absolutely remarkable. Look at his muscle activation patterns. He is using fiber types that most species reserve for emergency situations only. And his cooling system is keeping his core temperature stable despite the enormous energy output. His cooling system? Kethri asked. The sweating, Dr. Shenry explained. Most species overheat quickly during intense physical activity. Humans can shed heat through their skin, allowing them to maintain high output for extended periods. It is one of the most efficient biological cooling systems in the known galaxy. Thalvex grunted. I always thought human sweating was a weakness. It makes them lose water quickly. It is a trade-off, Dr. Shenry said. They must drink frequently to replace lost fluids, but in exchange they can perform sustained physical activity that would cause most species to collapse from heat exhaustion. She adjusted her scanner. In fact, according to historical records from Earth, humans used to hunt animals by simply chasing them until the animals overheated and could no longer run. The humans would walk after their prey for hours, sometimes days, until the prey literally died from exhaustion. The crowd around them had grown even larger. Workers from all over the station had come to see the human who was moving the unmovable crate. Some were recording videos. Others were simply standing in silence, watching something they had never expected to see. Marcus was at 160 meters now. The cargo ship was close, its loading ramp visible just 40 meters ahead. But the human had slowed down considerably. His steps were smaller, his breathing was rougher, and his arms were shaking visibly with each pull. A young Frenari worker pushed forward through the crowd. Should someone help him? He asked in a worried voice. He looks like he might fall. Thalvex shook his head. Help would be meaningless. Even if 10 of us pulled alongside him, we would add almost nothing to his effort. The mathematics are clear. Either the human finishes this alone, or he does not finish it at all. Then should we stop him? For his own safety? Thalvex was quiet for a moment. He watched Marcus take another step, pull the crate another half-meter forward, and then pause to catch his breath. The human's whole body was trembling, but his eyes were still fixed on the cargo ship ahead. No, Thalvex said finally. We will not stop him. But Commander, look at him, Thalvex said, pointing one armored finger at the human. He knows exactly what he is doing to his body. He knows the risk, and he has chosen to continue anyway. That is not stupidity. That is something else. He paused. Among my people, we call it warrior spirit, the willingness to push beyond your limits for a goal you believe in. Dr. Shenry nodded slowly. Humans have a similar concept. They call it determination, or willpower, or sometimes just stubbornness. She smiled slightly. Their history is full of stories about individuals who achieved impossible things simply because they refused to accept that those things were impossible. Kethri watched Marcus take another step, 165 meters. The crate was so close to the cargo ship now, so close to the end. I always thought humans were soft, she said quietly. They have no armor, no claws, no venom. They seem so fragile compared to other species. They are fragile, Dr. Shenry said. Their bodies can be damaged easily, but they are also incredibly resilient. They heal quickly. They adapt to almost any environment, and they have a psychological toughness that is difficult to measure. She paused. A human can be beaten, broken, knocked down again and again, and they will keep getting up, every time, until they either succeed or their body physically cannot continue. Marcus stumbled slightly and several people in the crowd gasped, but he caught himself, adjusted his grip on the straps, and kept pulling. 170 meters, 30 meters to go. The cargo ship's loading ramp was right there, waiting. The Frenari gambler named Chiktal had 6 arms and 12 eyes, and every single one of those eyes was fixed on the struggling human. Chiktal had been running gambling operations on Velora's cradle for 15 cycles. He had seen many strange things in that time. He had seen Drothkai arm wrestling contests that lasted for days. He had seen Villani swimming races in the station's water recycling tanks. He had once seen a Korvathi drink 40 glasses of fermented nectar without passing out. But he had never seen anything like this. "Bets!" Chiktal called out, waving 3 of his arms in the air. "I am taking bets. Will the human reach the ship or collapse first? Current odds are 3-1 in favor of collapse." Workers crowded around him, pulling out credit chips and data pads. The excitement in the air was thick enough to taste. Nobody wanted to miss this moment, and many wanted to make some money from it too. A Drothkai merchant pushed a large stack of credits toward Chiktal. 200 units on the human succeeding. Chiktal's eyes blinked in surprise. "You believe he will make it? He is barely moving. Look at him shake." "I have worked with humans before," the merchant said. "On a cargo run 3 cycles ago. One of them fell into a loading shaft and broke his leg." He paused. He climbed back out on his own, dragging the broken leg behind him, because he said he did not want to delay the shipment. Chiktal recorded the bet with 1 arm while 2 others continued collecting money from the crowd. "Anyone else?" 50 units on the human," said a voice. It was Kethri. She did not know why she was betting. She did not usually gamble. But something about watching Marcus fight against impossible odds made her want to believe he would win. The crowd continued to grow. There were now over 200 workers watching, plus at least 30 security officers who had come to maintain order. A few off-duty ship captains had wandered over from the nearby rest areas. Even a member of the Galactic Council observation team had arrived. A tall creature with silver skin who said nothing but watched everything with unblinking eyes. Marcus was at 175 meters, 25 meters from the cargo ship, so close now. But something was wrong. The human had stopped moving. He was still standing, still holding the straps, but his feet were no longer stepping backward. His head was hanging low, and his chest was heaving with rapid, desperate breaths. "He is done," someone in the crowd said. "His body has reached its limit." Chiktal began adjusting his odds. "New odds, 5-1 in favor of collapse. Get your bets in now." Dr. Shendry pushed forward with her scanner. "His vital signs are concerning. Heart rate is extremely elevated. Body temperature is at the upper edge of human tolerance. Muscle fibers are showing signs of micro damage." She looked worried. "He should stop. If he continues much longer, he could cause serious injury to himself." Commander Thalvex nodded slowly. "Someone should tell him." But before anyone could move, Marcus raised his head. His face was red and dripping with sweat. His eyes were surrounded by dark circles of exhaustion. Every muscle in his body seemed to be screaming for rest. But when he looked at the cargo ship, there was still fire in his eyes. 25 meters, he said to himself. His voice was rough and broken. "Just 25 more meters. You can do 25 meters? You can do anything for 25 meters." He took a breath, then another. Then he pulled. The crate did not move. The crowd fell silent. Even Chiktal stopped calling for bets. Everyone watched as the human pulled and strained and fought against the impossible weight behind him. Still the crate did not move. Then Marcus screamed. It was not a scream of pain. It was something else, something primal and ancient and full of fury. It was the sound of a creature that had been pushed to its absolute limit and had decided that limits were not real, that limits were just ideas, and ideas could be broken. And the crate moved. The wheels began to turn. 1 meter, 2 meters. Marcus was walking backward now, not pausing, not resting, just moving with a single-minded focus that seemed almost inhuman. His arms were locked straight, the straps cutting into his flesh. His legs were pumping steadily despite the trembling that ran through them. Impossible, Dr. Shenry whispered. His muscles should not be capable of this output. He has exceeded every theoretical limit in our database. 10 meters to go. The loading ramp was right there. The crowd began to cheer. It started with just a few voices, but it spread quickly through the mass of workers. Drothkai, Villani, Frenari, Korvathi, and a dozen other species were all shouting together, united by the sight of one small creature doing something that none of them had believed was possible. 5 meters. Marcus's feet hit the base of the loading ramp. 3 meters. The crate rolled up onto the ramp's edge. 1 meter. The crate passed the threshold of the cargo ship, and then it was done. Marcus released the straps and fell forward onto his hands and knees. His whole body was shaking. His breathing was ragged and harsh, but he was smiling. A weak, exhausted, triumphant smile. The crowd exploded with cheers and applause. Workers rushed forward, surrounding the human with expressions of disbelief and admiration. Chiktal was busy paying out bets to those who had wagered on success, his many arms moving in a blur of activity. Kethri pushed through the crowd until she reached Marcus. She did not know what to say. What could she say? She had just watched a human do the impossible. Human Marcus, she finally managed. That was just moving some cargo, Marcus said between heavy breaths. He looked up at her with that exhausted smile. Part of the job, right? But the label, Kethri said. The label said machine only. The regulations clearly state that organic workers should not. The sign said machines only, Marcus interrupted. He sat back on his heels and wiped the sweat from his face. Didn't say anything about humans. Kethri stared at him. For a long moment, she could not process what he had said. Then, despite everything she had been taught about professional behavior, she started to laugh. It was a strange sound, a Villani laugh, more like a series of clicking noises than the rumbling sounds humans made. But it was genuine. Did not say anything about humans, she repeated. I suppose it did not. The Drothkai merchant who had bet on Marcus pushed forward with a container of water. Here, human, you need to drink. Marcus took the container gratefully and drank deeply. Water ran down his chin and mixed with the sweat on his chest. When he finished, he let out a long breath. Thanks, he said. I really needed that. Commander Thalvex appeared next to Kethri. His 4 eyes studied the human with an expression that might have been respect. Human Marcus, what you did today was unprecedented. In my entire career, I have never seen anything like it. Marcus shrugged, a casual gesture that seemed almost absurd given what he had just accomplished. Like I said, those miners needed their parts. You could have been seriously injured. Yeah, Marcus nodded slowly. But I wasn't. There was no good response to that. Thalvex stood in silence for a moment, then turned away to order his security officers to help secure the crate inside the cargo ship. Kethri stayed next to Marcus. She wanted to ask him so many questions. Why had he done it? How had he known he could do it? What was it like to push your body so far beyond its normal limits? But before she could ask anything, Marcus looked up at her with tired eyes. Hey, he said, is there anything else that needs moving? I've still got some time left on my shift. The cargo ship departed 2 hours later, carrying the machine parts that the mining colony had been waiting for. The captain, a weathered Villani named Torik, sent a personal message to Kethri before leaving. He said he had never seen a more impressive display of physical strength in his 40 cycles of space travel. He also said he was going to tell everyone he met about the human who moved a machine-only crate. That was how the story began to spread. Within 1 day, the video recordings from Base 17 had been shared across the entire station. Within 1 week, they had spread to nearby systems. Within 1 month, the story of Marcus Chen and the impossible crate had reached almost every corner of known space. Kethri watched the spread with a mixture of amazement and worry. She had not expected the incident to become famous. She had not expected to receive thousands of messages asking for more details about the human freight handler who had done the impossible. She especially had not expected the official inquiry from the Galactic Trade Commission. The inquiry lasted 3 days. Representatives from 17 different species gathered in a conference room on Valora's cradle to discuss what had happened and what it meant for cargo handling regulations across the galaxy. Marcus was asked to attend and answer questions about his actions. He seemed uncomfortable with all the attention. He sat in the center of the room, wearing his simple gray uniform, surrounded by alien officials who studied him like he was a puzzle they could not solve. "Human Marcus," said the lead representative, a tall Korvathi named Velthax. "You moved a crate weighing 1,147 standard units a distance of 200 meters without any mechanical assistance. Can you explain how this was possible?" Marcus shrugged. It was the same casual gesture he had used after finishing the task. "I just pulled really hard." There was murmuring around the room. Several representatives exchanged confused looks. "But our records indicate that the maximum pulling force a human can generate is approximately—" "Records can be wrong," Marcus interrupted. "Look, I don't know exactly how I did it. I just knew those miners needed their parts. And I didn't want to make them wait. So I decided to move the crate, and then I moved it." "You decided to move it," Velthax repeated slowly. "You make it sound simple." "It wasn't simple," Marcus admitted. "It was the hardest thing I've ever done. My whole body hurt for days afterward. The station doctor said I pulled 3 muscles and strained about a dozen more." He paused. "But I finished the job. That's what matters." The inquiry continued for another 2 days, but no one could find a satisfactory explanation for what Marcus had accomplished. The scientists on the commission wrote a report saying that human physical capabilities had been significantly underestimated in galactic databases. They recommended a complete review of all species classification systems. But more importantly, the commission made a decision about cargo regulations. Kethri was in her office when she received the official notice. She read it 3 times to make sure she understood it correctly. Then she laughed, the clicking Vallani sound that had become more common for her since meeting Marcus. The Galactic Trade Commission had created a new cargo designation. Starting immediately, all stations in the galaxy would be required to add a note to their machine-only labels. The note said, "Human exception applies." Kethri printed out a physical copy of the new regulation and walked down to Bay 17. She found Marcus there, of course. He was loading boxes onto a small cargo shuttle, working steadily despite the fame that now followed him wherever he went. "Human Marcus," she called out. "I have something to show you." He put down the box he was carrying and walked over. When he saw the paper in her hands, his eyebrows rose in that curious human expression. "What's that?" Kethri handed him the document. She watched as his eyes moved across the words, reading the new regulation. When he reached the part about the human exception, his lips curved into a smile. "Human exception applies," he read aloud. "That's official now?" "As of this morning," Kethri confirmed. "Every machine-only label in the galaxy will include that note from now on, because of what you did." Marcus looked at the paper for a long moment. His expression was hard to read. Finally, he folded the document and slipped it into his pocket. "My mom is going to love this," he said. "She always told me I was too stubborn for my own good. Now there's an official galactic regulation proving her right." Ketri's scales shifted to warm gold, the Vallani color of amusement. "Your mother sounds like a wise woman." "She is." Marcus turned back toward the shuttle. "I should get back to work. These boxes aren't going to load themselves." He paused, then looked over his shoulder with a grin. "Actually, I guess they could. But where's the fun in that?" Kethri watched him return to his work. She thought about everything that had happened over the past few weeks. She thought about the massive crate that should have been immovable, the crowd that had gathered to watch, the disbelief on the faces of 100 different species, and she thought about what Dr. Shenry had said, about humans being persistence predators, about their refusal to accept impossible odds, about their ability to keep getting up no matter how many times they were knocked down. The galaxy was full of strong species. The Drothkai could crush rocks with their bare hands. The Korvathi could survive wounds that would kill any other creature. The Vallani could swim through crushing ocean depths without protection. But humans had something different, something that could not be measured in strength ratings or endurance scores. They had the ability to look at something labeled impossible and say, "I'm going to do it anyway." One cycle later, a new worker arrived at Valora's cradle. She was human, a young woman named Sarah who had just graduated from Earth's Freight Handling Academy. She was assigned to Bay 23, the same bay where Marcus had delivered the impossible crate. On her first day, she walked past a massive container with a glowing label on its side. The label said "Machine Only" in bright letters, and below that, in smaller text, were the words, "Human Exception Applies." Sarah stopped and looked at the label. Then she looked at the container. It was even larger than the one Marcus had moved. According to the readout on its side, it weighed over 2,500 standard units. A Villani supervisor approached her with a worried expression. "Human Sarah, please do not attempt to move that container. The weight exceeds even the human exception threshold. We are waiting for the heavy-lift drones to become available." Sarah studied the container for a moment longer. A smile slowly spread across her face. "How far does it need to go?" she asked. The supervisor's scales flashed to the pale yellow of alarm. "Human Sarah, I must strongly advise against—" "Hey, Marcus!" Sarah called out across the bay. "You busy?" Marcus looked up from his work. When he saw what Sarah was looking at, he grinned. "Give me 5 minutes. I'll grab some extra straps." The supervisor watched in horror as the two humans began preparing to move the unmovable container. She pulled out her communicator and called Commander Thalvex. "Commander," she said, her voice shaking slightly, "we have a situation in Bay 23. Two humans are about to attempt something impossible again." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then Thalvex sighed deeply. "I will alert the science team," he said, "and someone call Chiktal. I imagine he will want to take bets." The Villani supervisor ended the call and watched as Marcus and Sarah wrapped straps around the massive container. She knew she should stop them. She knew the regulations. She knew the limits of organic capability. But she also knew humans. So instead of stopping them, she found a place to stand at the edge of the bay, next to a growing crowd of curious workers. And she began to take bets of her own. Because if there was one thing she had learned from watching Marcus Chen, it was this. When a human said they were going to do something impossible, the smart money was on the human. Every single time. Every single